My name is Natalie Pierce. I'm 31 years old, and I still remember the sting of that Christmas morning 2 years ago in Seattle. The fire crackled, the smell of cinnamon rolls filled the air, and my parents beamed as they handed my younger sister, Jenna, a velvet box. Inside was a house key. I stared, stunned. Wait, they gave her a house? Dad glanced over, gave my shoulder a paternal pat, and said, "You'll understand someday." If you're watching this with family tension simmering in the background, hit that subscribe button, because this story might be exactly what you need to hear. Growing up in our craftsman-style home near Green Lake, Jenna and I were only 3 years apart, but you'd never know it from how our parents treated us. She was the dreamy, impulsive one who changed majors 4 times and still hadn't held a steady job by the time she turned 30. Meanwhile, I was the one who colored inside the lines. By the time I was 26, I had finished my MBA from the University of Washington, launched a boutique consulting firm, and bought my own condo in Queen Anne. I never asked my parents for help. In fact, I helped them refinance their mortgage after Dad retired. But that never seemed to matter. Whenever I mentioned my growing client base or finally hiring 2 full-time associates, Dad would just nod and say, "That's nice, Nat. But you know, Jenna's really feeling something with her pottery this time." Her feeling something often translated into unpaid rent, broken leases, or emergency flights to meditation retreats. Mom and Dad bailed her out time after time, cheering her courage to explore. And there I was, reliable Natalie, always called when a printer broke or a tax form confused them. That Christmas morning, I brought over a basket of homemade treats, thoughtful gifts for everyone, and even a few extra things I knew Jenna couldn't afford. Then they handed her the deed to a 2-bedroom bungalow in Ballard. Just like that. No conversation, no explanation, just, "You'll understand someday." The silence in that moment told me everything I needed to know. My presence in that family had always been as the safety net, the stable one, but never the favorite. The Thanksgiving before that had sealed it for me. I had landed a high-profile contract with a major tech startup, and when I tried to share the news, Mom interrupted me mid-sentence to ask Jenna if she'd found the right kind of clay. And Jenna? She smiled and said, "Not yet, but I'm getting close." And they clapped. "Honey, that's amazing," Mom had said without even looking up from her phone. "But Jenna is going through something really serious right now. Her landlord raised the rent again, and we're trying to figure out how to help her." Later that evening, I overheard Dad's voice through the vent in the guest room. "We'll sort out something, sweetheart. We always take care of family." That line echoed in my head as I sat on the edge of the guest bed, staring at the ceiling. Do they not see me as family too? It wasn't that I didn't love them. I did. I even loved Jenna, despite everything. I knew her carefree nature masked a persistent undercurrent of anxiety and deep-rooted self-doubt. My parents believed it was their duty to protect her. And perhaps they were right in some ways. But I had stopped expecting their approval years ago. I learned to find my worth in my own milestones, not in a proud look from Dad or a warm, "We're proud of you," from Mom. Still, part of me, some stubborn inner child, kept hoping they'd finally see the full picture of who I'd become. That hope was why I returned for Christmas last year. I could have claimed a packed client schedule or even booked a solo getaway to Palm Springs. But Christmas had always been sacred to us, a time when nostalgia smoothed over the cracks. And I had spent months planning the perfect gift for my father, something deeply personal, something that cost me more than just money. Back in October, while helping Mom retrieve old photo albums from the attic, I stumbled across a stack of foreclosure notices addressed to Dad. His contracting business, once a neighborhood staple, had clearly been struggling. I had no idea. He'd never said a word during our weekly phone calls. Rather than confronting him, I quietly got to work. I met with the bank, consulted with my advisor, and used a large portion of my savings to pay off the remainder of their mortgage. It took time, paperwork, and sacrifice. But the deed was clear now, and the home was safe. I wrapped the deed in a sleek red folder, placed it inside a gold gift box, and tied it with a deep burgundy ribbon, Dad's favorite Christmas colors. I imagined the look on his face, how maybe, just maybe, He'd finally see that my practicality wasn't distance. It was devotion expressed in a different language. As I packed my car on Christmas Eve and headed north toward the old family home, snow began falling in soft flurries. Through the living room window, I spotted the familiar multicolored lights on our tree. This Christmas would be different. This time, I thought, they'll finally understand. Mom still clung to the same decorations we'd used since we were kids. A charming mix of faded kindergarten crafts and delicate glass ornaments, each one tied to a memory. As I pulled into the driveway, I sat in my car a few moments longer, the engine ticking softly as it cooled. My fingers tapped lightly on the steering wheel while I stared at the softly lit porch. The small gold-wrapped gift for Dad sat in my overnight bag on the passenger seat, nestled beside a tin of cookies I'd baked the night before. This Christmas will be different, I whispered to myself again. This time, they'll really see me. Jenna's dented Subaru was already parked near the garage at an odd angle, the windshield covered in a thin layer of snow. She lived 2 hours away, yet somehow still managed to arrive first. A flicker of irritation crossed my mind, then guilt quickly followed. I had stayed late finishing up a project, prepping for a January client presentation. She probably had no such deadlines. Before I could knock, Mom opened the front door, her arms wide, pulling me into a hug that smelled of pine needles and cinnamon. "Natalie, there you are. Was the drive awful?" "Not too bad. Just had to wrap up a few things for work before heading out," I replied, brushing snow off my coat. The house radiated warmth and nostalgia. Garland traced the staircase banister, candles glowed in every corner, and Bing Crosby crooned softly from the speaker in the dining room. Jenna appeared from the kitchen, holding a glass of mulled wine, her hair now a bright, fiery red, and her sweater a festive green. "You clean up like an accountant," she teased, side-hugging me. "I was just telling Mom and Dad about this gallery I might show at in the spring." "That's great," I said, genuinely trying to mean it, even as that familiar pang settled in. The quiet acceptance that my own news, a major promotion to senior consultant, wouldn't spark the same applause. Dinner felt muted. Dad barely spoke, pushing his mashed potatoes around his plate. Mom filled the silence with excited updates about Jenna's art and the incredible energy at her last artist's retreat. When they finally turned their attention toward me, it was in the form of vague, perfunctory questions. My answers, numbers, projections, business strategies, seemed to glide past them like static. I caught them whispering to Jenna more than once. Each time, they glanced in my direction as if checking whether I'd noticed. That same hollowness crept in again, the sense that I'd never quite belonged in my own family story. After dinner, as we gathered for our annual hot chocolate, I overheard Mom's hushed voice. "Should we tell her tonight?" "Tomorrow," Dad replied. His tone held something unfamiliar. Strain. Jenna met my eyes briefly, then looked away. And just like that, I knew. Something was coming. I smiled and played along, describing how the morning sunlight filtered through the harbor mist outside my apartment, but my mind was racing. What were they planning? Could this be about the foreclosure? Did they somehow find out what I had done to save the house? That night, back in my childhood bedroom, I lay awake beneath the familiar plastic stars still clinging to the ceiling, leftovers from my 8th grade science phase. The room hadn't changed much. The same pale blue walls, the creaky dresser, the old bookshelf with my high school trophies, and a worn poster of a national park I once wanted to visit. The sounds of the house, once soothing, now felt like murmurs of secrets just beyond reach. My thoughts drifted to Christmases long past. The year Jenna unwrapped a deluxe oil paint set, and I received a stack of thermal socks and a dorm organizer. The time Dad spent all morning setting up her new laptop with editing software, while mine, meant for college classes, sat unopened on the floor. Every year, it was the same. She got color, expression, praise. I got function and formality. It wasn't envy. I loved Jenna, even admired her artistic courage. But the ache came from feeling unseen. My achievements never seemed to inspire the same delight, as if stability made me less deserving of celebration. The next morning arrived, wrapped in that quiet hush only snow can bring. For a fleeting second, Lying in my old bed, I felt that childish flutter of Christmas magic. Then the weight of everything settled back onto my chest. The foreclosure notices, the whispered glances, the vague tension in the air. I dressed intentionally. Red sweater, black slacks, soft waves in my hair. Not overdressed, but composed, prepared. Downstairs, the scent of coffee and cinnamon filled the air. Mom was arranging cinnamon rolls, humming distractedly. Jenna sat cross-legged on a bar stool in plaid pajamas, her cheeks flushed with excitement. Dad stood at the window, bathrobe pulled tight, watching the snow fall like it held answers. "Merry Christmas," I offered cheerfully as I stepped into the kitchen. They all turned, slightly startled, as if surprised I was still there. "Oh, Merry Christmas, honey," Mom said quickly, her tone warm but oddly rehearsed. Coffee? Breakfast unfolded as usual. Carols drifted softly from the living room. We sat around the kitchen table, eating together, laughing in bursts. But underneath, something was off. Dad checked his watch 3 times. Jenna couldn't stop smiling. Mom dropped a spoon. Twice. As we cleared the dishes and moved toward the living room, I finally asked, "Is everything okay?" "Of course," Mom replied, too brightly, forcing a smile. "Why wouldn't it be?" "Just excited for Christmas," Jenna said, barely suppressing a giggle. It escaped anyway, only to be silenced by a quick look from Dad. The Christmas tree glowed softly beside a modest pile of gifts. It wasn't as many as in years past, but I knew, though they hadn't said anything directly, that money had been tight. My gaze lingered on the gold-wrapped box tucked inside my overnight bag, the one holding the mortgage documents. Would it matter? Would this be the moment they saw that love could look like spreadsheets and sacrifice too? We settled into our usual places. Dad in the recliner, Mom and Jenna cuddled on the couch, and I took the armchair by the window, my usual spot, tucked just enough out of focus. But today, one gift stood out immediately. A tiny box, wrapped in silver paper with a curled bow, propped perfectly beneath the tree as if posed for a catalog photo. It hadn't been there last night. And across the top, in Dad's unmistakable handwriting, was Jenna's name. A chill crept up my spine. Whatever this was, I clearly wasn't in on it. "Well," Dad said, his voice a little too cheerful, "I think we should start with that one." He pointed toward the silver box. Mom reached for her phone, already recording. "Let's get this on video. You're going to want to remember this." Jenna glanced at me briefly, something flickering behind her smile. Excitement. Guilt. "You're going to be so surprised," she said. I tightened my grip on my coffee mug and forced a smile. "Can't wait." Outside, snow drifted gently past the window, painting the picture of a peaceful Christmas morning. Inside, though, my chest tightened as all eyes focused on Jenna and that gleaming silver box. "Open it slowly," Mom said, camera rolling. "This is special!" Jenna, never one to savor suspense, ripped into the wrapping like we were 6 years old again. Inside, she pulled out a small velvet jewelry box. My stomach dropped. Was it the sapphire necklace? The one that had belonged to Grandma and that Mom always said would be passed down one day? I had assumed we'd share it, or decide when the time was right. A pang of hurt surged, but I shoved it aside. "It's just a necklace," I told myself. But then Jenna opened the box. It wasn't jewelry nestled inside. It was a key, gleaming, brass, brand new. It dangled from a keychain shaped like a little house. Jenna's eyes widened. She looked at our parents with confusion, then dawning realization. Is this what I think it is?" she whispered. Dad leaned forward, beaming now, a proud, satisfied smile growing across his face. "The little yellow bungalow on Maple Street," Dad said gently. "The one you always loved whenever we passed it. It's yours, sweetheart." Mom was crying now, the kind of overwhelmed joy that made her voice tremble as she kept filming with her phone. "We closed last week. Everything's finalized. You can move in whenever you're ready." The room tilted slightly, or maybe it just felt that way. I tried to process what was happening. That bungalow was a charming 2-bedroom tucked near downtown Kirkland, walking distance to the art co-op, boutique cafes, and the weekend farmers market. I'd seen the listing myself a few months earlier. nearly $400,000, a beautiful home, and completely out of reach for anyone struggling financially. And yet, here we were. Jenna launched herself off the couch and wrapped both our parents in a tearful hug. I can't believe this. I don't even know what to say. It's too much. How did you afford this? She asked through sniffles. Don't worry about that, Dad said, his voice thick with emotion. We've been planning and saving for years. You deserve a fresh start. A space that's yours, where you can finally focus on your art without worrying about roommates or landlords raising the rent. I sat frozen in my armchair, my mug of coffee long forgotten and cold in my hands. They had just gifted her an entire house. A house. While I had quietly rescued this very home from foreclosure. A financial situation they never even acknowledged. Nothing made sense. Wow, I finally said. My voice sounded like it was coming from somewhere outside of me. That's quite a gift. All three faces turned toward me, as if suddenly remembering I was still there. Jenna's smile faltered for a second, a flicker of guilt crossing her face. Mom's expression wavered. Dad's was unreadable. It's a big step, I added slowly. How did you manage to buy a house now? I thought things were tight with the business. It was the closest I'd come to confronting the truth I'd uncovered. The foreclosure letters, the debt, the silence. A flicker of tension passed across Dad's face. Financial matters are complex, Natalie, he said. There are things you don't know. Jenna's had so many struggles with housing. Mom jumped in. You have your condo, your career. Jenna needs this foundation to grow. And then Dad said it. You'll understand someday. The words landed like a punch. Familiar, dismissive, final. When you have children, you'll understand that sometimes you help the one who needs it most. The message was unmistakable. Jenna needed help. I didn't, so I didn't count. Jenna deserved extraordinary generosity. I did not. She was the one they worried about. I was the one they relied on, the one they assumed would always be fine. I thought of the foreclosure notices still tucked in the upstairs drawer. I thought about the money I had pulled from my own savings, investments meant for my future, to save this very house, our family home, money that could have gone toward a down payment for my own place. I thought of years of swallowing my disappointment as my promotions earned polite nods while Jenna's first Etsy sale brought champagne. Right? I said softly. Of course. Jenna was already chattering away, talking about which wall would be best for her easel and what shades of green she might paint the kitchen. She wanted to start a garden, just herbs at first, and host a housewarming brunch in the spring. Mom was buzzing with suggestions, window treatments, reading nooks. Dad explained the taxes were prepaid, the utilities already connected, the cleaning service scheduled. And I sat there, invisible again. The weight of the mortgage paperwork in my gift for Dad pressed like lead in my bag beside the tree. What would he think when he opened it? Would he be grateful? Or would my gesture feel like a reprimand? Would it seem performative in the shadow of what they'd done for Jenna? When can I see it? Jenna asked, clutching the key like it was made of diamonds. We can drive over this afternoon if you want, Dad said. It's all ready for you. Jenna beamed. You guys kept this secret for so long. How did you even pull it off? I couldn't help myself. How long have you been planning this? Mom and Dad exchanged a brief glance. About 6 months, Mom said casually. When Jenna's landlord mentioned possibly selling the building. 6 months, the same time the foreclosure letters had started arriving. The same stretch of video calls where Dad looked drained, brushing off my questions about the business. I swallowed hard. Well, it's an incredibly generous gift. You have something too, Natalie. Mom jumped in quickly, misreading my tone. We got you a lovely set of professional cookware. You said you wanted to try new recipes. Remember? Cookware. Jenna got a house, and I got pots and pans. The absurdity of it almost made me laugh. Almost. Thank you, I said automatically. That'll come in handy. Jenna was studying the key now. Wait, there's something engraved on it. She squinted, then smiled. Pierce family home, Dad said proudly. Because it's yours now. But it's also part of our legacy. Our family legacy. Family legacy. Apparently, it just didn't include me. The phrase echoed in my mind as I glanced toward the wrapped box tucked behind the tree, the one holding the deed to this very house. The actual Pierce family home, the one that would have slipped away without my quiet intervention. And yet, somehow, they had deemed it less important than buying Jenna a house of her own. Should we move on to the rest of the gifts? I offered, my voice tighter than I intended. Yes, of course, Mom said, sounding oddly relieved at the change of subject. There's something for everyone. And so I played along. I admired the sleek new cookware set with polite gratitude. I thanked them for the soft scarf and delicate earrings that came with it. I watched as Jenna unwrapped box after box, art supplies, cozy sweaters, matching sets of utensils, everything needed to furnish a new home. I handed out the gifts I had selected with care. A rare first edition of Mom's favorite novel, a handcrafted wooden watch for Dad from a Seattle artisan, and for Jenna, a set of museum-quality pastels she'd mentioned casually months ago but never bought. Still, my final gift, to Dad, remained under the tree, untouched. The last one. The longer it sat there, the more I considered pulling it back, inventing a reason to save it, saying I forgot and would mail it later. But something in me, pride maybe, or just raw honesty, refused to let me. So I waited, sipping fresh coffee, making light conversation, my smile as carefully placed as the star atop the tree. The living room had shifted into its usual post-unwrapping chaos. Torn paper piled in corners, ribbons gathered neatly into Mom's craft bin, as they always were. Jenna had opened a note app on her phone, already making a list of things she'd need for her house: cutlery, paint rollers, maybe an area rug. She asked if the laundry unit was included, if the internet was already hooked up. I nodded when appropriate, spoke when asked, but inside, I felt like a guest watching a carefully scripted holiday special. And then, only one gift remained: mine. The gold wrapping shimmered under the soft tree lights. I'd spent extra time on it, crisp folds, matching bow, wanting the outside to reflect the weight of what was inside. Well, looks like we saved the best for last, Mom said with a bright smile. That one's for you, Robert. From Natalie. Dad looked up from Jenna's tablet, where they'd been discussing accent wall colors. Oh? I thought we were done, he said lightly, standing and walking over. He picked up the package, his tone playful. Must be something special from my very successful daughter. But his eyes flickered with something else. Uncertainty, maybe even dread. Did he already suspect what I had uncovered? Was he worried about what I might say in front of everyone? It's nothing, really, I said automatically, an instinct I'd honed over a lifetime. Downplay. Stay modest. Don't take up too much space. Dad waved a hand. Now, Natalie. Don't sell yourself short. Your gifts are always thoughtful. He reached for the box, taking his time. He began untying the ribbon with the careful precision he'd always used, preserving the wrapping paper like he had as a child when money was tight. Normally, I would have smiled at the ritual, but today, every second felt stretched taut. My heart thudded in my chest as he peeled back the tape, lifted the lid, and looked inside. The moment he saw the documents, his expression shifted. Confusion replaced his polite smile. He pushed aside the tissue paper and pulled out the first page, the official mortgage satisfaction letter. Beneath it, the deed to the house, clean, clear, and paid in full. His smile disappeared entirely. His hands froze. "What is it?" Mom asked, leaning forward. "Natalie, what did you give him?" Jenna set down her phone, finally noticing the change in the room. I swallowed. "It's the mortgage," I said quietly. "To this house. It's paid off." Silence. Even the soft carol playing in the background seemed to die in the air. Dad's hand shook slightly as he read through the letter, eyes darting across the page, jaw clenched. "How did you—" "I found the foreclosure letters," I said, voice low but steady. "In the attic. In October. I was helping Mom find photo albums. The house was 3 months from foreclosure." Mom gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. "Foreclosure!" "Robert," What is she talking about? Dad turned pale. His shoulders sagged under the weight of it all. Margaret, I was going to tell you, he said quietly. I was trying to fix it. By buying Jenna a house? The words left my mouth before I could stop them. Sharper than intended. Jenna blinked. Wait, what? Dad, is this true? We were losing the house? Dad gently placed the documents on the coffee table, hands deliberate, trying to keep control of something quickly unraveling. The business has been struggling for a while, he admitted, ever since the pandemic, then supply shortages and increased costs. I used part of our retirement just to keep the lights on, but it wasn't enough. The mortgage fell behind. Mom's voice cracked. And you didn't tell me? I didn't want you to worry, he whispered. I thought I could fix it before it got worse. By buying me a house? Jenna asked, incredulous. How does that even make sense? Dad looked at her, then at me, then down at his trembling hands. The bungalow cost significantly less than what we still owed on this house. His voice was low, worn. The plan was to sell this place before the foreclosure finalized, pay off what we could, use the bungalow as our fresh start. He hesitated, then added, You'd let us stay with you until we got back on our feet. The pieces fell into place in my mind, one after another, clicking with a sickening clarity. The bungalow wasn't just for Jenna. It wasn't even mostly for her. It was for all of them. A backup plan. A lifeboat. Jenna sank deeper into the sofa cushions, the brightness she'd carried all morning completely gone. So you weren't giving me a home, she said flatly. You were giving yourselves a fallback. I was the contingency plan. It's not like that, Mom said quickly, though even she didn't sound convinced. We were helping you while helping ourselves, she added. We would have explained everything once we were settled. But now it doesn't matter, Dad cut in, glancing at the mortgage documents. Because somehow, Natalie already paid it off. He turned to me, a mix of astonishment, shame, and something else in his eyes. There was still over $200,000 left. How? I liquidated investments, I said quietly. Used most of my savings. Took a small loan from my 401k. I'll repay it over time. Dad stared at me. You jeopardized your own future. Your own financial security. It was worth it, I said simply. His brow furrowed. But why didn't you tell us? Why go behind our backs? There was defensiveness in his tone now, like I'd crossed a line. I met his gaze. Would you have let me help if I'd offered? I asked calmly. Or would you have said you had it under control, that I should stay focused on my own life, like you always do? He didn't answer. We both knew the truth. Jenna was still staring down at the key in her palm. What once symbolized freedom now felt like something far heavier. So, what happens now? She asked quietly. Is the house still mine? Was any of this real? No one spoke. The perfect Christmas morning had completely unraveled. Years of unspoken tension and silent favoritism now lay exposed, raw in the quiet room. Finally, I broke the silence. I think, I said, voice steady, we need to have a real conversation. All of us. About money, about choices, about what family actually means, and how we move forward from here. Dad nodded slowly, still holding the mortgage documents like they weighed 100 pounds. Yes, he said, voice rough. I think we do. Silence followed, thick and unrelenting. Outside, the snow kept falling in soft waves, muffling the world beyond our walls, trapping us inside the fallout. The Christmas tree blinked in its usual pattern, casting shifting shadows across 4 stunned faces. It looked festive, but the mood had changed entirely. Mom stood first, stiffly, as if her body had aged a decade in the last 10 minutes. I need tea for this conversation, she muttered. Strong tea. I'll help, Jenna offered quickly, already rising. She looked grateful for the chance to step away. Dad and I remained, the legal documents still sitting between us on the coffee table like a truth bomb no one could defuse. How long has the business been struggling? I asked softly. Dad rubbed his face, suddenly looking every bit of his 62 years. Really struggling? About 3 years. But the signs were there before. I just didn't want to see them. And you never thought to tell me? I asked. Dad, I work in finance. I could have helped. I wanted to help. You're my daughter, not my advisor, he replied, his voice low but firm. It wasn't your burden. But it was Jenna's? The words came sharper than I intended. He sighed. It wasn't our proudest moment. We thought we were solving two problems at once. Helping her, helping ourselves. Before I could say more, Mom and Jenna returned with a tray of steaming mugs. No one touched the cookies beside them. All right, Mom said as she eased back onto the couch, now sitting noticeably farther from Dad than before. We all need to be honest now. No more pretending. She looked at Dad. Robert, start. How bad is it? Dad glanced around the room, realizing, at last, there was no room left for comforting lies. The business is bankrupt, he said. I've been propping it up with personal funds. That's gone now. We have about $3,000 left in our checking. The retirement accounts are empty, and until Natalie stepped in, we were 90 days away from foreclosure. Jenna clutched her mug tighter. And the bungalow? How did you pay for that? Dad exchanged a weary look with Mom. It was bank-owned. Another foreclosure. We got it for $190,000. I took a loan against my life insurance policy for the down payment. The mortgage is smaller than this one. So, the plan, I said slowly, was to let this house go, move in with Jenna, and then what? If you've ever felt like the invisible one in your own family, hit that subscribe button, because the next part of this story reveals what happened when I finally stopped staying silent. Start over, Dad said quietly. Downsize the business. No more employees, just me. Take on smaller jobs I can manage alone. While living with me, Jenna added, her tone sharper than I'd ever heard from her. It would have been temporary, Mom chimed in quickly. A year at most. Jenna shook her head, her expression a mix of disbelief and growing anger. And when exactly were you planning to share that part of the plan? After I'd moved in? After I painted the walls? After I'd started calling it home? We were going to tell you today, Dad admitted, his voice low. Once the excitement settled, we thought it would be easier if you saw it as your house first, with us as guests. Manipulative guests, I muttered before I could stop myself. That's not fair, Mom snapped, her composure finally cracking. Natalie, we were drowning. We did what we thought was best, for all of us. By lying? I asked. The words hung in the air, heavier than anything we'd unwrapped that morning. Mom's face softened, her lips trembling. We didn't lie, she whispered. We just didn't tell the whole truth. I turned to her. And you, Mom? Did you really not know any of this? The business? The foreclosure? Her eyes flicked to Dad, then dropped to her untouched tea. I knew things were tight, she said slowly. But not that tight. Robert's always handled the finances. Margaret, Dad started, but she cut him off, voice firmer now. But I haven't been completely honest either. That got everyone's attention. I've been having health issues I haven't told any of you about, she said, voice quiet but steady. Severe migraines, dizziness. I've seen 3 specialists over the past year. Dad's eyes widened. What? When? Why didn't you tell me? I scheduled appointments during your work hours, paid the copays in cash so they wouldn't show up on the credit card statements you monitor. She let out a humorless laugh. Seems like we've all been keeping secrets. Jenna placed her mug down with enough force to splash tea onto the table. This is insane. Our entire family is stitched together with lies. Mom hiding her health, Dad hiding financial collapse. You two planning to move in with me without saying a word, and Natalie paying off a mortgage behind everyone's back. I was trying to help, I said, defensive now. By doing exactly what they did, Jenna said, her voice rising. Going behind everyone's back. The accusation hit harder than I expected, because deep down, I knew she wasn't wrong. Hadn't I been just as dishonest by hiding what I'd found? By taking action behind their backs? By not giving anyone the chance to be part of the decision? Why didn't you just tell me? Dad asked again, echoing the very question that had echoed through my mind for weeks. I took a breath, searching for honesty. Because I knew you wouldn't accept my help. You never do. You and Mom have spent my whole life telling me I'm capable, that I don't need advice, that I always land on my feet. But what you really meant was, we won't support you because you don't ask for it. Meanwhile, Jenna gets constant support, emotional, financial, whatever she needs. If I had confronted you about the foreclosure and offered to help, I continued, you would have told me to keep my money, that you had it under control. And what's so wrong about that? Dad shot back. Wanting our daughter to be independent? But you only expect one of your daughters to be independent, I said quietly. The other one gets rescued. Constantly. He looked stunned. Do you know what that feels like? I asked. To watch you bend over backward for Jenna while treating my accomplishments like chores you expected me to finish? That's not fair, Mom said, shaking her head. It's not, I agreed. When was the last time you celebrated one of my achievements with even half the enthusiasm you give Jenna when she sells a single print? When have you ever offered me help? Not because I asked, but because you wanted to? We're proud of you, Dad said quickly. Being proud isn't the same as being supportive, I replied. And it sure doesn't explain why you bought Jenna a house while you were losing your own. Jenna, who had been quiet until now, finally spoke. She's right. You treat us differently. Everyone turned toward her. Her voice was steady but soft. You always have. You've acted like Natalie has everything figured out, like she never needs anything. Do you know how much pressure that puts on me? Like the only way I'll get your attention is by struggling. I blinked. That I hadn't expected. I'd always assumed she relished the attention, that she leaned into chaos because it got her what she wanted. That's not true, Mom said reflexively, but even she didn't sound convinced. It is, Jenna said. And for what it's worth, I've been jealous of Natalie for years, for her stability, her confidence, her strength. My jaw tightened. You were jealous of me? When they obviously favor you? They don't favor me, Jenna said quietly. They just think I need them more than you do. They worry about me, Jenna said, her fingers still tracing the edge of the key. But worry isn't the same thing as respect. The room fell into a heavy silence. We all sat with her words, their truth settling into the space between us. Had we all misunderstood each other for years? Dad cleared his throat. I think your mother and I have made some serious mistakes, he admitted slowly. We thought we were responding to your individual needs, but maybe we were just reinforcing patterns that weren't healthy? And lying to each other along the way, Mom added softly. She reached for Dad's hand, the earlier tension between them replaced by something more vulnerable. All of us, she said. So what now? Jenna asked, lifting the key slightly. What happens with the bungalow? With this house? Dad looked at the mortgage documents on the table, then over at me. Natalie saved this house, he said plainly, at significant personal cost. The least we can do is start being honest about everything. It wasn't resolution, but it was something. Still, the questions hovered. Would Dad rebuild his business? What exactly was happening with Mom's health? What would become of the bungalow? And how would we, as a family, move forward now that the old labels, the responsible one, the struggling artist, the protective father, the self-sacrificing mother, had all been shattered? I looked around at the three people I had known my entire life and wondered if I had ever really seen them until today. Eventually, the conversation moved to the kitchen. Mom insisted we needed food if we were going to keep talking. There was something oddly reassuring about watching her pull ham and potatoes from the fridge while Dad quietly set the table, muscle memory overriding discomfort. Jenna and I sat at opposite ends of the kitchen island. The key lay between us like a placeholder for a new kind of relationship neither of us had ever known. I want to understand what really happened with the business, I said as Mom placed warm plates in front of us. All of it. No more protecting us. Dad nodded and took a deep breath. His serving was smaller than usual, his appetite dulled by the weight of truth. It started before the pandemic, he admitted. Construction around Seattle got competitive fast. Big companies from the east side started underbidding me, using bulk discounts to price me out. He explained how he'd tried to keep up by slashing his own margins, taking on more hours, letting staff go until only 2 remained. Then COVID hit, he continued. Projects dried up. And when things picked up again, material costs were through the roof. I took out a business loan just to keep the lights on. Then I took out a second loan, Dad continued, voice low. I kept thinking things would turn around if I could just hold out. But supply chain delays made it impossible to finish projects on time. That meant penalties and angry clients. Why didn't you say any of this during our weekly calls? I asked. Dad let out a bitter laugh. What father wants to admit failure to his daughter? Especially the one who excels at exactly what he's failed at. Financial stability. I could have helped, I said firmly, before it got this bad. He gave me a tired look. Would you have accepted help if our roles were reversed? The question stopped me. Would I have? Or would I have let pride and pressure keep me silent too? Mom cleared her throat gently. While we're being honest, I need to explain what's been happening with my health. She described months of worsening migraines, blinding pain, dizzy spells. She'd seen 3 different neurologists, endured test after test, but still had no clear diagnosis. The medication helped, but left her exhausted and foggy. I didn't want to scare anyone, she said. And honestly, I didn't want to face the possibility that it could be something serious. Do they think it is? Jenna asked, her tone softer now. They don't know yet, Mom replied. But the latest doctor wants me to go to Boston for advanced testing. Tests we can't afford, Dad added quietly. And just like that, everything began to click. The secrecy, the financial juggling, even the desperate plan to use Jenna's new home as an escape route. They'd been drowning and hiding it. My turn, Jenna said suddenly, her eyes downcast. I haven't been completely honest about my art career either. We all looked at her in surprise. That gallery opportunity I mentioned? It fell through months ago. Actually, I've been working at a coffee shop this past year to make rent. My art hasn't sold in over 18 months. But you're always talking about your shows, your contacts, Mom began. Because that's what you expect, Jenna said quietly. For me to be the creative one, the free spirit chasing her dream. Her smile was faint, pained. I didn't want to admit that I'm nearly 32 and might have failed at the one thing I always believed I was meant to do. Dad looked stunned. So? You've been struggling more than we realized? Jenna nodded. Which makes your plan to move in with me even more ridiculous. I can barely stay afloat myself. The room fell still again. Each of us had been playing roles we thought others needed, while hiding who we truly were and what we feared most. And you, Natalie? Mom asked gently. What truths have you been keeping, aside from saving our home? I stared down at my plate, the food long gone cold. The question lingered in the air. I considered how much to reveal, how much of myself I'd kept hidden. I guess, I said slowly, I've been pretending your approval doesn't matter to me, acting like I'm completely self-sufficient because that's what everyone expects. They waited, listening. But the truth is, I've spent my whole adult life chasing your approval, hoping one day you'd be as proud of my path as you've always been of Jenna's. Mom reached across the table, her fingers warm as they wrapped around mine. Oh, sweetheart. I'm not trying to guilt you, I added quickly. I just want to be honest. I've been jealous of the attention Jenna gets, and apparently, she's been jealous of the respect you give me. Jenna met my eyes from across the kitchen island, offering a soft, almost sad smile. We both knew. We'd both been missing what the other had. The irony, Dad murmured, shaking his head, is that your mother and I truly believed we were doing right by both of you. Supporting Jenna's creativity because it seemed more delicate. Praising your independence because it seemed like what you wanted. We never meant to make either of you feel unseen, Mom added. We love you both. So much, just in different ways. Maybe that's the problem, I said gently, loving us differently instead of equally. We kept talking as the afternoon wore on. Decades of misunderstanding spilled across the kitchen island between us. There were flashes of tension, the sting of old wounds, but also moments of real connection, where we saw each other clearly for the first time in years. As dusk crept in, casting a lavender hue over the snow-covered yard, Dad returned to reality. About the houses, he said. Natalie saved this one. I can't express how grateful I am. But we still have the bungalow, And that mortgage is a weight we can't carry. We could sell it, Mom offered. Use the money to replenish our retirement. It was meant to be Jenna's, Dad said softly. Even if the plan was flawed, the intention was sincere. We wanted you to have something solid. Jenna looked at the key still resting on the kitchen island. She reached out, then paused. I think it's time I stand on my own, she said. Really stand. Not with a house I didn't earn, not with more rescues. She slid the key toward Dad. Sell it. Use it to rebuild. Help Mom get the care she needs. Are you sure? Mom asked. Jenna nodded. For once, I want to fix my own mess. My analyst brain was already doing calculations. The housing market around here is still strong, I said, glancing toward the window where snow had begun to settle on the sill. Since the bungalow was bank-owned, you could probably sell it for more than you paid. That might buy you some breathing room. Dad looked at me, not as the daughter who always had everything together, but as someone he could turn to. And the business? We can go over the books together, I offered. See if restructuring makes sense, or if it's better to let it go and start something smaller, more focused. He nodded slowly. I'd appreciate that, he said. The words came hard for him, but they came. As we continued talking through practical next steps, something shifted between us. The walls we'd built, of pretense, pride, protection, had finally crumbled. We were standing in the truth together, exposed but grounded. It hurt, but it was real. And in that reality was the possibility of something new, something stronger. I think, Mom said, getting up to start a fresh pot of coffee, this might be the most honest Christmas we've ever had. No one disagreed. 6 months later, we sat around the same dining table, though the mood was warmer, lighter. Outside, summer buzzed in the garden Mom had planted during her recovery. The kitchen windows were open, letting in a soft breeze laced with lavender and basil. After months of appointments, her condition was finally diagnosed: vestibular migraines. Treatable, thankfully. Her new medication, combined with gardening and a slow return to routine, had helped her find balance again, literally and emotionally. Dad, now retired from running his own business, had taken a job as a construction manager at a mid-sized development firm. Fewer headaches, stable income, and health benefits that covered Mom's treatments. He cooked dinner with ease now, moving around the kitchen with new purpose. As I helped set the table, I turned to Jenna. How's the new apartment working out? She smiled. A genuine smile that reached her eyes, not forced or performative. Small, but it's perfect. Totally within budget on my new salary. After accepting that her art career had stalled, she pivoted, bravely. Combining her creative flair and her years in coffee shops, she landed a role as marketing coordinator at a local brewery. She still painted on weekends, but without the financial pressure. They actually value my art background, she added, setting down the plates. I'm designing their seasonal labels. That's fantastic, I said, and I meant it. The tension that had defined our sisterhood for so long had softened. Not erased, but reshaped into something kinder, mutual. The house, our house, now fully ours again, had changed too. Not just structurally, but in spirit. It finally felt like home. The living room had been painted a warm sage green, a brighter, more inviting hue than the dull beige it had worn for years. Family photos, once packed away during a time when smiles felt forced, now lined the hallway again. There were several of Jenna and me as kids, playing, laughing, before comparisons and quiet competition began to shape the air between us. We gathered around the table, conversation flowing more naturally than it had in years. There were no roles being played, no curated masks, just people, present and honest. We had learned, in the hardest possible way, that secrets do far more damage than the truths they're meant to protect. As we finished the last bites of dinner, I took a breath. I have news, I announced. I've been offered a promotion at the firm. Mom sat up straighter. Natalie, that's wonderful, she said. And for once, the joy in her voice felt fully for me. I'll be moving into a senior financial advisor role, I continued, managing my own client portfolio. They want me to specialize in family financial planning. Dad chuckled. Makes sense. You've had some personal training lately. I've had experience, I corrected gently. But we all saved this house by being honest with each other. Speaking of honesty, Jenna set down her fork, her expression serious but soft. I've been meaning to ask you something. I raised an eyebrow. Are you really okay with how things turned out? You used so much of your savings to save the house. Now Mom and Dad are back on their feet, and I've got this new job. But what about you? Have you been able to rebuild your safety net? Her question held no edge, just genuine concern. I took a moment. Financially? I'm getting there, I said honestly. The promotion helps, but what I've gained in other ways has meant more than any balance sheet. For so long, I continued, I thought I had to prove my worth with results, promotions, paychecks. Like maybe if I was successful enough, you'd all see me the way you saw Jenna, as someone worth loving out loud. Mom's eyes welled. We always valued you. I know, I said, but we all got stuck in patterns. Dad and I spoke through actions and achievements. You and Jenna connected emotionally, but none of us were really speaking each other's language. Dad nodded slowly. I thought I was showing you respect, giving you space, letting you lead. I know, I replied. And I thought staying silent was protecting everyone. But all I did was reinforce the walls we were all trapped behind. After dinner, we all drifted out to the back porch. The summer evening was warm, and the faint glow of fireflies flickered at the edges of the yard. Over the past few months, we had created a new rhythm, family dinners every few weeks, where we practiced something we had never mastered before. Open, honest communication, even when it was uncomfortable. I sold the bungalow, Dad said as we settled into the porch chairs. Final closing was yesterday. We all knew it was coming, but hearing it out loud gave the moment a certain weight. Not sadness exactly, just gravity. How do you feel about it? I asked Jenna. She took a breath, then let it out slowly. Relieved, actually. That house carried so much symbolism. Dad's hidden stress, my own fears about failing. It was like we kept patching over cracks instead of having real conversations. It feels good to have closure. The sale covered the rest of the mortgage, Dad added, and it gave us a bit of a cushion. Not a windfall, Mom said, but enough to restart our retirement savings. And we set up something else too, an emergency fund, a real one, for all of us. A shared family fund, with agreed-upon terms, shared responsibility, and most importantly, no shame. It was part of a new tradition we'd all committed to. Financial transparency without judgment or pride. The four of us had even drafted a basic agreement, nothing legal, just clear guidelines about how we'd handle financial support or requests going forward. Not because we didn't trust each other, but because we now understood how easily unspoken assumptions can lead to damage. As the sky darkened and everyone began preparing to head home, Jenna back to her apartment across town, me to my place near downtown, Dad pulled me aside before I reached the door. I never properly thanked you, he said quietly, not just for paying off the mortgage, but for forcing us all to face the truth. It wasn't the smoothest approach, I admitted with a small smile. Maybe, he said, but I'm not sure we'd have listened to anything gentler. He hugged me, really hugged me, not the quick, one-arm goodbye I'd grown used to. I've always been proud of you, Natalie, he said, but now I understand you better, and that means more. Driving home, I thought about that phrase that had haunted me since Christmas. You'll understand someday. He had been wrong about what I'd come to understand. It wasn't about who got a house or who needed help. It was about the way families work and don't. About how love, even when clumsy, can be real. About how truth, though sometimes painful, is the only path to real connection. The mortgage papers that had once felt so heavy now sat in Dad's desk. Not as a record of financial rescue, but as a symbol of emotional change. By saving our home, I had inadvertently rebuilt the foundation of something more important. Our family. When I pulled into my apartment garage, my phone buzzed. A text from Jenna, a selfie of her in her cozy living room, paintbrush in hand. The caption, "Art for joy, not for rent." We had started checking in regularly. Texts, coffee, even the occasional venting phone call. For the first time, we were becoming sisters. And that Christmas, the real gift wasn't a deed or a house key. It was truth. Truth that finally let us love each other as we really are. Flawed, honest, and worthy. If you followed my journey to this point, thank you. I never expected that a single act, paying off my parents' mortgage, would unravel years of silence, comparison, and emotional distance. But it did. And through that unraveling, we found something real. So now I want to hear from you. Have you ever felt like the responsible one in your family? The one who's expected to be okay, no matter what? Leave me a comment. Share your story. I promise, this is a space where your voice matters. And if this story resonated with you, please consider subscribing. Your support reminds me that I'm not alone in this, that maybe we're all just trying to untangle our roles and be seen for who we really are. If there's one thing I've learned, it's this. Love without honesty becomes performance. And silence isn't strength, it's a wall. If you're navigating tough family dynamics, I encourage you to choose the hard truth over the easy silence. Speak your needs. Ask the questions. Say what you've been holding in. It might not go smoothly, but it might just save something bigger than a house. It might save the home inside it, and that's always worth the risk.